The whispers of Willow Creek. The sun beat down on Abigail's back as she knelt, weeding between rows of corn. The rich, earthy scent of the soil filled her lungs, a familiar comfort. "Needs more water, just like your father used to say," she murmured to the stalks, her voice thick with unshed tears. John had known this land like the back of his hand, coaxing life from it even in the driest seasons. Now, the responsibility rested solely on her shoulders, a weight that felt heavier with each passing day. A sleek, black sedan crunched to a halt on the gravel road bordering her property. A man in an expensive suit emerged, his polished shoes kicking up dust. "Mrs. Meadowsweet," he called, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "I'm Mr. Harrison from Crestwood Developments." We spoke on the phone. Abigail straightened, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "I remember," she said, her voice flat. "We're prepared to make you an offer, a very generous one, for your land." He gestured expansively. "Imagine, Mrs. Meadowsweet, you could retire comfortably, travel the world. This isn't just land, Mr. Harrison," Abigail interrupted, her gaze hardening. "It's my home. It's my life. It was my husband's life. It's not for sale." Harrison's smile didn't falter, but a glint of steel entered his eyes. "Think carefully, Mrs. Meadowsweet. Times are changing. This farm, it's becoming unsustainable." Later that evening, Abigail sat on the porch swing with Martha, her closest friend. Fireflies blinked in the twilight, their gentle light failing to chase away the unease that gnawed at Abigail's insides. He said the farm was unsustainable, Martha. Am I being foolish? Should I just sell?" Martha reached out and squeezed Abigail's hand. "Don't you let that man bully you, Abby. John built this place with his own 2 hands. It's more than just a farm, it's a legacy. You just need to find a way, that's all." The whispers of Willow Creek seemed to sigh around them, carrying secrets and warnings on the evening breeze. A shadow over the meadow. The snap of splintering wood jolted Abigail awake. Dawn was barely a smear of gray on the horizon, but already something was wrong. She grabbed her shawl and hurried outside. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Along the north fence, 3 men, burly and unfamiliar, were methodically dismantling the posts, kicking them aside like unwanted kindling. Further in, another pair trampled through her newly sprouted corn, their heavy boots crushing the delicate stalks. "Stop!" Abigail cried, rushing towards them. "What do you think you're doing?" One of the men, the one with a greasy handlebar mustache, spat on the ground. "Just making way for progress, little lady. You'll be gone soon enough." Sheriff Clem's response later that morning was no better. He leaned back in his chair, polishing his badge with a greasy rag. "Now, Abigail, are you sure you saw them do it? Maybe it was just a storm." He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "That land's been in your family a long time, hard to imagine anyone wanting you gone." That evening, behind the dusty mercantile, Clem met with Mr. Harding and 2 other men in dark suits. The air hung thick with the scent of stale whiskey and desperation. Harding slapped a thick envelope on the table. "Consider it a bonus, Clem, for overlooking things. We need that land, and Mrs. Meadowsweet seems resistant." Clem pocketed the envelope, his eyes darting nervously. "She's a stubborn one, that's for sure. But accidents happen, right? Fences fall, crops wither. A woman alone, she might just decide this life ain't worth the trouble." Harding smiled, a thin, cruel line. "Precisely, Sheriff. Precisely." The crickets chirped, oblivious to the shadow that had fallen over the meadow. The rivers grasped. The sun beat down on Abigail's back as she weeded the last row of carrots. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and the promise of rain, did little to ease the ache in her bones. A shadow fell across the neat rows. Jedediah, his face flushed crimson, stood at the edge of the field, flanked by 3 other men. "Meadowsweet," Jedediah spat, the word like gravel. "We're tired of your stubbornness. Sheriff Clem ain't gonna do nothing about it, so we will." Abigail straightened, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "About what, Jedediah?" she asked, though she knew perfectly well. About her refusing to sell her land, about her daring to farm while still in mourning, about her simply being alone and vulnerable. They advanced, their boots crushing the young shoots. Fear coiled in Abigail's stomach, cold and tight. Before she could react, 2 of them grabbed her arms, their grip like iron. She struggled, but they were too strong. "Let me go," she cried, the word lost in the rush of blood in her ears. They dragged her towards the river, the muddy bank slick beneath her bare feet. The roar of the water grew louder, a hungry beast promising oblivion. She saw Sheriff Clem leaning against his horse by the general store, watching, his face an impassive mask. He touched the brim of his hat, a mocking gesture of indifference. Panic clawed at her throat. The cold, churning water was just ahead. Jedediah's face loomed close, his eyes filled with a cruel satisfaction. "Maybe a little dunking will change your mind, widow." The lone rider. The icy water gnawed at Abigail's ankles, each wave a fresh bite of dread. Silas and Martha held her arms with cruel strength, their faces masks of righteous fury. Which? Martha spat, her breath misting in the frigid air. Silas grunted, shoving Abigail further in. The current tugged, a silent accomplice to their malice. Please, Abigail croaked, her voice raw. I've done nothing. Nothing? Silas roared, his grip tightening. Your husband barely in the ground and you're already eyeing our men. A low rumble vibrated through the frozen ground, so faint Abigail almost missed it. A prickle of hope, foolish perhaps, bloomed in her chest. The sound grew, a steady thudding that echoed off the bare trees lining the riverbank. It was the unmistakable rhythm of approaching hooves. Silas paused, his brow furrowed. Martha craned her neck, squinting at the horizon. A lone rider crested the small rise in the distance, a dark silhouette against the pale winter sky. The figure grew larger with startling speed, horse and rider a single powerful entity. It was him, Mr. Harrison. He rode like a man possessed, cyclones' hooves churning the frozen earth. The wind whipped at his coat, and his face was set in a grim line. He was coming straight for them, a voice of authority. The shouts died in Abigail's throat as a deep voice cut through the commotion. Release her, now. Jedediah Harrison sat tall on his stallion, a silhouette against the setting sun. Dust swirled around his polished boots as he dismounted, his gaze sweeping over the assembled settlers. He moved with a quiet confidence that belied the steel in his eyes. Sheriff Clem, a man whose belly strained against his starched shirt, puffed out his chest. Harrison, this here's a town matter. We got a right to handle it our way. Your way nearly drowned a woman, Harrison retorted, his voice a low rumble that carried across the clearing. That makes it my concern. He stepped closer to the group holding Abigail, their faces a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. The rope securing her wrists cut into her skin, the cold water having long since numbed her fingers. She's a witch, Harrison. She cursed our crops. A woman with stringy hair shrieked from the back of the crowd. Harrison ignored her. Sheriff, he said, his gaze unwavering, are you going to uphold the law, or are you going to stand by while these people commit murder? Clem's face reddened. Don't you go questioning my authority? This ain't your place, Harrison. You got no say here. I say that woman deserves a fair trial, not a watery grave. And I say that if you can't provide it, Sheriff, then I will. He took another step forward, his hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. The air crackled with unspoken threats, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows across the faces of the assembled settlers. Abigail watched, her shivering body a testament to their cruelty, her eyes searching Harrison's for a flicker of hope. Cyclone's fury. The mob surged forward, their faces contorted with righteous fury. Abigail stumbled, the rough hands on her arms bruising her skin. The cold dread in her stomach intensified as the muddy bank of the river loomed closer. She scanned the crowd, a desperate plea for reason forming on her lips, but found only hatred reflected back. Then, a thunderous roar shattered the tense silence. Cyclone, black as midnight, reared up, his massive hooves pawing the air. Sheriff Clem, caught completely off guard, was thrown from his saddle, landing in a heap in the churned earth. The crowd recoiled, momentarily stunned. Before anyone could react, Jed Harrison launched himself from Cyclone's back, a blur of motion cutting through the chaos. He landed heavily, the impact jarring his bones, but he ignored the pain. His eyes were fixed on Abigail, her face pale with terror. He shoved his way through the bewildered settlers, their chants dying in their throats as they recognized the unwavering determination in his gaze. Let her go, he roared, his voice echoing across the riverbank. He reached Abigail, his strong hands closing around hers, pulling her free from their grasp. A declaration of love. The rope chafed Abigail's wrists, a burning reminder of her neighbor's betrayal. She refused to meet their eyes, focusing instead on the churning water of the Willow Creek. Its cold spray kissed her face, a cruel parody of a baptism. Then the rope slackened. She gasped, the sudden freedom a shock. Mr. Harrison, his face grim, sliced through the last strand with his bowie knife. This has gone far enough, he said, his voice resonating in the sudden silence. He turned to face the assembled settlers, Sheriff Clem puffing out his chest at the fore. I will not stand by and watch an innocent woman be persecuted based on flimsy accusations and outright lies. He stepped closer to Abigail, his gaze direct and unwavering. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Clem's face, already florid, deepened to a furious crimson. Therefore, Harrison continued, his voice rising to carry over the growing unrest. I, Jedediah Harrison, declare my intention to marry Abigail Meadowsweet. The air stilled. Abigail felt the blood drain from her face. Marriage? To him? She had barely exchanged 2 words with the man. Clem sputtered, momentarily speechless. A woman in the crowd fainted, collapsing into her husband's arms. A dog barked, then whined, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The only sound louder than the pounding of Abigail's heart was the rushing water of the creek, oblivious to the drama unfolding on its banks. Beneath the ancient oak, the crowd was a patchwork quilt of faces, some curious, others openly disapproving. Martha Higgins clutched her Bible tighter, her lips pursed. But there were also smiles, whispers of encouragement, and the honest warmth of neighbors who knew a good heart when they saw one. Jed stood beneath the ancient oak, its gnarled branches a silent benediction, his gaze fixed on Abigail. She walked towards him, a vision in borrowed lace, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something akin to hope. Reverend Thorne, looking flustered but determined, cleared his throat. We are gathered here today, Jed cut him off gently. Just the vows, Reverend, if you please. He turned to Abigail, his weathered face softening. Abigail Meadowsweet, I offer you my hand, my heart, and my promise to stand by you, come what may. Not for convenience, not for appearances, but because I admire your spirit, your strength, and your unwavering kindness. Will you have me? A tear traced a path down Abigail's cheek. I will, Jedediah Harrison, with every breath I take. Her voice, though soft, carried to the edges of the small gathering. The Reverend, recovering slightly, led them through the simple vows. To have and to hold, from this day forward. As they exchanged rings, Jed took Abigail's hand in his calloused fingers intertwined with hers, a tangible symbol of 2 lives entwining. The gold band, plain and unadorned, felt warm against her skin. A collective sigh rippled through the crowd. Even Martha Higgins seemed to soften, just a fraction. Above them, a robin sang, its melody weaving through the rustling leaves of the ancient oak, a testament to enduring love in the face of adversity. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in hues of gold and amber, sealing their fate beneath the watchful gaze of the ancient tree. A new beginning. The morning mist clung to Meadowsweet Farm, a stark contrast to the fire that had raged in Abigail's soul. Now, a different kind of warmth settled within her as she stood beside Jed, mending a fence. His quiet presence was a balm, his capable hands a steady reassurance. The south pasture needs tending, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. Clover's thinning. She nodded, the simple task a welcome distraction. Together, they walked the land, a silent understanding blooming between them. He didn't press her to speak of the horrors she'd endured, but his eyes held a depth of empathy that spoke volumes. Jed's influence began to ripple through Harmony Creek. He quietly purchased the failing general store, stocking it with quality goods at fair prices, effectively undercutting Sheriff Clem's brother-in-law's exorbitant markups. He established a fund to help struggling farmers, his generosity a direct challenge to Clem's authority and the developer's greed. One blustery afternoon, a black sedan, mud-splattered and smelling of desperation, idled at the edge of town. 2 figures, their faces etched with defeat, sat inside. They watched Jed ride past on horseback, a subtle nod of acknowledgement passing between them. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of broken promises, the car turned around and sped away, leaving Harmony Creek to its newfound peace. Abigail watched them go, a faint smile gracing her lips. The battle wasn't over, but a significant victory had been won. She looked at Jed, his gaze steady and resolute. A new beginning had indeed arrived, one built on justice, compassion, and the quiet strength of a shared life.